What's going on, Cardinals fans, and welcome back into the Brenden Schaeffer St. Louis Cardinals writer YouTube channel. Doing a quick video here today to react to John Mozeliak's Tuesday press conference held down there at Busch Stadium, announcing the signings of Lynn and Kyle Gibson to the St. Louis Cardinals for 2024. In this video, we're going to listen to some Mozeliak audio, react to anything that we think is important. Excuse the lighting here in the guest bedroom. I've still got some work to do on my setup as it pertains to videos. Haven't done a video in a while. Most of what you see on the channel has been audio, but we're going to mix in some more video and maybe even some live streams again soon to come. I know there are some people that have been clamoring for that. If you enjoy Cardinals content, whether it's during the season, off season, or anywhere in between, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I think it's right over there. If I pointed to the correct side of the screen, that's where it would be. But make sure you subscribe to the channel for Cardinals content and subscribe to Be Schaeffer Daily, the Daily Cardinals podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you enjoy that sort of stuff. But right now, we're going to jump right into John Mozeliak's press conference, skipping over really most of the opening remarks where he talked about signing Lynn and signing Kyle Gibson, because I think the most interesting part of everything is when he gets into the questions. But I'll start here toward the tail end of his sort of opening speech, where he says, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Yadier Molina. So here's Mozeliak on Yadi, and then we'll get into all of the other stuff that he talked about during the press conference.
I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on Yadier Molina. I get asked about it all the time. He and I have spoken. Really, the question is, he knows he's always going to be welcome back, but it's just trying to work through what a role might look like and what the time commitment might look like. So more to come there. And finally, this is not the finish line. This is a day in time. There's still a lot of work to be done, and thank you.
So it's John Mozeliak on Yadi. Basically, they got to figure out the role. It's what we've been talking about on Be Schaeffer Daily. How often does he want to be involved? I've said it would make a lot of sense for him to at least be at spring training, but an everyday in uniform role throughout a 6-month season. It would surprise me if Yadier Molina would want to do that at this point in his life, right? He's just a freshly retired player, only has been out of the game for 1 year. Is he ready to hop back into that time commitment? I would be a little surprised by that, and some would say that maybe he would be if it meant he could be a big league manager, but the Cardinals have one of those right now, so that's not going to be a role for him here in 2024, at least in St. Louis. So we'll see what ends up happening there. I think it'll be something, but not yet to be determined what that looks like. And obviously, Daniel Descalso officially announced as the bench coach, with Joe McEwing being reassigned to a special advisor role. That's another addition to Ollie's staff. So we'll see what the staff moves are. Mozeliak did say more could be coming, but they're still trying to get those details ironed out. And I would imagine the Yadi thing is probably near the top of that list. But hear what Mo said there at the end before he opens things up to questions is they're not done. This is just a day, not the finish line, in so much as how the Cardinals view it. So let's continue on with the press audio where Mozeliak starts to take some questions here.
So now we take questions. Unless there's none, and I'll get out of here.
Classic Mo.
As you add these two, and I don't know if you put specific numbers on pitchers at this point, but do you believe you are still lacking a 1, a 2, and a 3?
Look, I think on any given day, that's your one. I think that's the thing you have to realize about baseball. You play every day.
Oh.
So to go out and just sign one elite pitcher and then do nothing else, that's not going to solve our problems. Our problems were getting deeper into games, and both these two gentlemen pitched a lot of innings last year. One did it on a very competitive team, one got traded to a very competitive club, and they both bring not only experience, but the ability to do that, and that's important. As I said, this is not the finish line. This is just a day. I'm not going to predict what's going to happen over the next month or 2 months, but we know our work isn't finished.
Thought the questioning from Frank Cusimano there was interesting. Do you still feel you need a 1, a 2, or a 3? I mean, I don't think Mozeliak feels that way. I bet Mozeliak would agree that the Cardinals still need a 1, right? And hopefully they still think they need a 2 as well. But when you look at having a rotation now stocked with guys like Lynn, Kyle Gibson, Miles Michaelis, and Steven Matz, that's 4 of 5 spots, unless they're leaning into the idea that when they're going for 2.5 starters, maybe that actually ends up being 3.5, and Steven Matz is more considered as a part-time guy, a swingman, or the swingman comes from somewhere else that we haven't seen yet, because I don't view Lance Lynn or Kyle Gibson as swingmen. I mean, they threw 180, 190 innings respectively last year, and I just think those are the innings eaters that are going to take over for the guys that couldn't fill the entire role in 2023. Like Wainwright pitched half a year, Hudson not effective in 80 innings. You had Jake Woodford not effective in 50 innings or whatever he threw. Like, you're having to replace kind of a bunch of bits and pieces. They've done so with a 4 and a 5, and I think that's what Lynn and Gibson can be, but they've done so in a way that feels like you're getting more certainty for what you're paying for. You're getting veteran experience, not only on the mound in those innings that they give you, which, again, are those innings going to be quality? We don't really know. They had a 5.23 combined ERA last year. What's the quality going to be is a fair question. But what they bring to the clubhouse, I don't think should be underestimated, because you do have a need for veterans who have been around the block and have done it before to show these younger guys maybe how to do it. They kind of threw them in last year and said, hey, let's see what happens with these younger players, and they just didn't have enough. And by the end of the year, they had scrapped those plans and were just bringing in any random veterans, the Casey Lawrence, the Jacob Barneses of the world, that they could find just to literally get through the season. That's what it devolved to last year for the Cardinals. They don't want to get into that again. And so, yeah, they're paying $10, $12 million for a couple of guys that they feel like are going to give them a leg up in that area. But obviously, the notion of a number one is something talked about a lot in this press conference.
With the games that they provide and the salaries that we got them for, have you created some flexibility there to pursue another starter?
I hope so.
Flexibility to pursue a starter. Hope so.
That was the plan.
That you stress the others or trust the GMAs?
Yeah.
Point, like a number
Skip ahead a little bit.
If somebody's out there, there's always the Gershwin, the puke point. Is there
Well, I don't.
some math that you guys won't cross?
It's Martin Kilcoyne asking about whether there's a puke point on a contract for pitchers.
I mean, look, we still have to be responsible.
He didn't say prudent.
And I feel like this is always sort of a silly question. Don't be offended. But,
He got you, Martin.
you know,
He cooked you.
just because there's a number that we may or may not go over, but there's also is the player's desire to be here. This is a two-way street. It's not just us throwing money at something and hopefully we can resolve it. It's got to be mutual. It has to be someone that feels it's a fit here. I mean, that's why we identified these two players today, because they truly wanted to be a part of the Cardinal organization. There are other players we talked to that were, you know, just looking at what the financial proxy might look like.
So that's interesting. Like, yes, it's easier to sign players that want to be on the team that they want what you're selling. But there is also, I think, a point at which you can pay more money, or just, okay, if guys are looking at the finances of it, let them. Like, that's sometimes what you do have to do to get a guy to sign on the dotted line. The Cardinals seem to be more enamored by guys that want to buy into what the Cardinals are selling, and they want the Cardinal way, and they want St. Louis. I think that makes sense, because you don't want to get down the road and have a guy that just signed for money and didn't care where it came from, and then he's not really bought into the team mentality. But also, if that guy can strike out 11 batters per 9 innings, then maybe you sign that guy and you take a chance that he'll buy into the system when you get him. I don't know. That's kind of an interesting quandary.
So I think to try to boil it down into your statement it's just not fair, because that's just not how it really works. And so as the off season continues, some more negotiations and more talks will happen, but we'll see where we end up. But we think today is a very good first step, because the biggest thing we needed last year was definitely some innings and depth in that rotation.
They got innings.
Away from big ticket items.
Well, go back to Derek's point. The reason we structured the deals we have was to give us some flexibility to keep moving on.
So there's Mozeliak saying they've got that flexibility, right? We're going to move past the questions a little bit.
Not really. We were happy we were able to achieve club options on both, so we could just see how this year goes, and obviously that gives you a little insurance for 2025 as well.
Derek was kind of asking there about the term of the contract specifically. We know, based on reports, Lance Lynn's getting like $10 million guaranteed with some incentives baked in. Gibson, I believe, is $12 million. Both have a club option for 2025. It's really going to boil down to, do they perform? And if so, you can kick that can down the road. If not, like, it feels like these short-term contracts for the Cardinals are, can they find guys to get them through and compete this year while God willing, some of these young players will emerge. But as Mozeliak says later on in the presser, they didn't want to have to put all their eggs into the basket of knowing that these young players like Zach Thompson or Graceffo could emerge right away. We'll try to skip through some of the questions. I do have a bit of a time crunch before my radio show, and I want to get this video up as quick as I can. So bear with me, but we'll have a much more complete breakdown of thoughts and be able to dive in more to specific topics the rest of the week.
Before the season ended, you said you had 3 starters from outside for the rotation. Is that so you think that based off of getting these guys locked up, you guys could focus on a bigger signing, a trade?
The notion of Ben Fred's question here is, now that you've locked up a couple of these kind of back-end rotation guys and you have that certainty at the bottom of the rotation, does it free you up maybe to focus on at the top, I think is what he's asking.
A fourth, did you say?
You have 4 new pitchers for the rotation this season. Are you still thinking in terms of 3?
No,
I'm not sure where the 4 came from. It never really was 4. He said 3 and then walked that back, but you're gonna get the answer about 3 again, I think, here.
probably thinking more in terms of 3 based on how things are looking. But I think the offseason is very fluid. Things change. We haven't really taken a huge deep dive yet into the trade market. So we'll allow that the next couple of weeks for that to percolate and see where that goes. But, still looking to add to this organization.
It's kind of interesting to me that they haven't dove into the trade market. It's kind of what he said last offseason as well, or at winter meetings in 2023, last January, like 10 months ago. It's like, yeah, we didn't really dive in too much to the trade market with the pitching, and it just seems like they're more comfortable operating in free agency in the very limited scope of like players that want to be a Cardinal, and so we can talk to them. Is it a deal where you get your feelings hurt if a player does it? If you feel like you wasted time going after a player that doesn't want you, it seems like that might be a bigger factor for the Cardinals in the way they operate than we maybe realize, just based on the way that John Mozeliak is talking here. Let me know in the comments as well as you're listening along what your thoughts are from the press conference, Cardinals fans.
Guys you have locked up, is a $200 million contract for a starter possible for the right guy?
I think, again, that's a silly statement for me to weigh in on because
he was asked if a $200 million contract would be doable for the right guy. Mo thinks that one's silly too. Cardinals fans probably don't.
What if the player just doesn't want to be here? And, so...
Then offer in the money anyway.
Well, I think
make him say
depends
no.
on terms, like how it's structured. Obviously, when you look at the future of our system right now, we don't have a lot of long-term commitments on the pitching side, but that's been very strategic in a lot of ways because, injuries happen and things happen, but, we're certainly going to remain open-minded as the offseason goes.
At this point, in terms of filling out the rotation, does it look like this, that your first priority would be to go the free agent route, but if that's not going to work and you don't find it here, the next one would be a trade?
Yeah, I don't think I want to get into what my offseason looked like.
He didn't really answer that question. We're going to move on.
Well, there's obviously another big name pitcher coming over from Japan.
This is Derek asking about Yamamoto, basically.
Yeah, I think our breadth.
Are the Cardinals positioned with these Asian players, Yamamoto being the guy that obviously everybody wants to know about?
Over in Asia has increased, but I think we've had a strong understanding of what those markets look like. Obviously, traditionally, I think a lot of players like to end up on the coast when they come over, but, we'll allow time to determine that.
The Ozarks has more coastline than the state of California. I learned that from TV.
Do you think that by investing your time or having somebody there, you can change that? Because you can't change your geography.
Can't change your geography.
I think you can help influence, but I don't know if you can change it dramatically.
All right, so if Yamamoto wants to be on a coast, there's not a lot the Cardinals can do to convince him otherwise. And when asked about the $200 million, it's like, well, does a player want to be here? Who really knows? But I think you offer the $200 million anyway. And again, the term does matter. You're not going to do it over a 5-year deal, but $200 million over, 6 or 7 or 8 year deal. Offer the contract and make the guy say no. That would be my thought process. If you're interested in him, throw the money on the table in a big old briefcase and say, here's what we're offering you. Take it or leave it. And if they leave it, then you can move on with peace of mind. That's how I would do it, but I'm not so sure if that's the way they approach it.
Lance specifically, what do you see? Body did last year.
Well, obviously.
Martin was asking about the body of work for Lance Lynn versus last year, which wasn't as strong. What have they seen from him, and to make them believe he's going to be good in 2024?
Honestly, we think this ballpark will play better for him.
I agree.
You know, he did give up a lot of home runs, so very well aware of that.
44 of them.
I think the other thing is he wants to show that he can be better than that.
This is the line.
I think Lance with a chip is a good Lance.
Bang.
And I think he's got a little chip on his shoulder.
That's my favorite line of the press conference. Lance with a chip is a good Lance. And I agree with that.
Just like his consistency, and, you know, I think when you look at both these guys, they understand what it's like to pitch at this level. They know what the expectations are. And, you know, there's a phrase we sometimes refer to as going pole to pole. And, you know, these guys understand that, and that's what this organization desperately needs.
The Cardinals last year kind of relied upon a lot of guys that hadn't been there before. And even though you're looking at underwhelming performances by Lynn and Gibson last year, Lynn with a 5.73 ERA, Gibson 4.73, they both threw a lot of innings and they both been around the block. And it seems the Cardinals are just interested in that certainty that they don't have to worry about, like, what happens when our number 4 or our number 5 flame out. These guys aren't going to flame out. They're going to take the ball and they're going to give you 30-plus starts, and come what may, and maybe a ballpark like Busch that gives up fewer home runs could help a guy like Lynn. And Gibson was serviceable as a back-end guy with like a 4.7 ERA. So we'll see what happens there.
You know, these two moves collectively, kind of looking at where guys have been injured, you need some people you can just count on. Is that part of this?
Well, you need guys you can count on, but you need guys with experience. You need guys that can help younger guys.
Mo continuing to talk there about the experience factor as well, but we'll skip ahead since that was kind of reiterated already.
Maybe always best if you get your biggest addition first, and then
I like this question.
in that order. This doesn't necessarily have to be the case, and offseason play out differently.
The notion that did they have to get the biggest addition first, or can they do what it seems like they're doing, get these kind of smaller back end of the rotation, certainty elemented guys in, and then they can go from there?
Was there a sense of if guys who wanted to be really got interested locked in, so it could kind of free things up to focus on conversations that may take longer due to...
Yeah, maybe the other, yes, to answer your question, but the other way, the way we were approaching it is we knew we need innings. And if we were just to go out and sign one good pitcher that was exciting, then where do we go to backfill? And some of the timing of this necessarily wouldn't go with us being patient. So to get two guys that, you know, almost collectively had an aggregate of 200 innings last year pitched, had we not acted on this week, they're probably not here tomorrow.
And again, that's why I think this could be seen as maybe not panic mode for Cardinals fans that are disappointed by these moves, because they're seeing these moves as the end-all be-all. And Mo said multiple times, this is just a day. This is not the finish line. I feel like that is the way the Cardinals are looking at it. And again, they didn't shoot down the idea of a $200 million contract. It's going to be like, does Yamamoto want to come to St. Louis? They probably aren't far enough along yet to know if it's viable, but I think they're willing to do it. It's just like you can't spend all your time chasing that and then say you strike out on that and Lynn and Gibson had signed and those were guys that you thought you could get. You might as well get a little bit of cost certainty, a little bit of inning certainty toward the bottom of the rotation, and then build from there. But I still think the Cardinals need to shoot the moon when it comes to the big names that they're chasing.
Whereas some of the upper-end pitchers are still out in the market.
They're still out there.
Usually every season, some of that can help these guys kind of bounce back as well.
I certainly hope so. Look, I think both these guys can help clubs, right? So you use the word bounce back. I wouldn't. I mean, I
probably
think
would.
These guys do want to show why they are where they are. And first off, I think, you know, Kyle, pretty good pitcher last year. I mean, 195 innings in a league that's hard to do. So I really feel like,
Thought it was 192,
speaking with
but I'll
Ollie,
check.
Dusty, they do think they can help both these guys get to a further along with their career. But
Yeah,
you know,
192.
these guys know what they're doing, and they have a plan for what their strategy is, and I think that's what's important, right? We could have maybe gone and traded for someone that's 2 or 3 years of control, meaning 2 or years of experience in the big leagues, but we needed guys that could come in, have a presence, know what it's like. I mean, for all of you that spend time in our clubhouse, I mean, you witnessed missed it, and I think they're both the kind of guys that are going to help our clubhouse.
A little bit of cutting out on the audio there, which I apologize for. But yeah, it just seems very clear the Cardinals are after the certainty of what these guys bring to the table. And again, I put a tweet out that combined the numbers for Wainwright, Hudson, Jake Woodford, and Flaherty, because I count Flaherty as one of the not good pitchers from last year, whereas Montgomery, like, you're trying to replace somebody who pitched well. Flaherty was disappointing, so I lumped him in because it kind of leveled out the innings and the starts between those four guys and the two starters Lynn and Gibson brought in over the last 2 days. Basically identical number of starts within a few, identical number of innings within a few dozen, and the ERA about half run lower from the Lynn-Gibson combo compared to the conglomerate of Wainwright, Flaherty, Hudson, and Woodford. So the Cardinals seemingly getting better in that area, but like, again, it's incrementally so, and you still have to replace Montgomery. That's the thing. Like, you do need an ace. It's good to start and have like a foundation, a baseline, a floor, so that the bottom doesn't drop out on this season like it did last year, but you still have a lot of work to do. And I think that has to come at the top of the rotation with big names. You got to land one of the big names. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because I'm pressed for time, but there's a question that I want to get from, I think it was Frank Cusimano that asked about guys who are not penciled into the rotation, but Mo thinks they could be special as pitchers for the organization.
Chance to be special right now in the organization.
Well, we like a lot of our young players. I think that the difference between this offseason and what we did last year was
this is key.
We gave a lot of the younger players that opportunity. Versus this year, we want to go in with a little bit more certainty.
And I agree with that. They gave younger players more opportunity. But, like, you also can't count Dakota Hudson as a younger player, right? Like, some of the guys that they inevitably had to give the ball to was sort of after the season was gone. They just didn't have enough talent, honestly. And then they gave some opportunity to guys like Drew Rom, guys like Zach Thompson, guys like I'm kind of blanking on somebody, Matthew Liberatore. And, like, those guys collectively didn't answer the bell. There was nobody that emerged and was like, oh, this is a future number 2 or number 1 in the rotation. They all were, like, various levels of fine. Rom really kind of struggled. But I think that's what's interesting is, like, yes, you gave opportunities to young guys, but it's because you clearly didn't have enough, so somebody had to pitch those innings. That's sort of the way it devolved, at least in my mind. But this is important, the rest of the answer from Mo.
And have that veteran presence. Obviously, we still want camp to have some competitive side to it. You look at somebody like Zach Thompson, he pitched well. But he still has to establish himself. Whereas what we did today with like a Lance Lynn and a Kyle Gibson is we brought two guys in that know how to do it, what to do, and why they're doing it. And so I think just the approach of last year versus this year is just different. Again, young players may emerge. They may surprise us. Obviously, somebody like a Graceffo may end up
name drop
camp, open up eyes, or might be someone that ends up in our bullpen. But what we don't want to end up doing is saying we're counting on X, Y, and Z, and then we're ended up being disappointed. And so we're trying to get a little bit more sure-handed, a little bit more bird in hand, so we know that when we go out and play each day, we have a chance with that starter.
I think that's what it is. It's establishing the floor rather than hunting for a ceiling from these rotation spots, because you could throw Zach Thompson in there, and maybe as a young player you haven't seen his best yet, and so he emerges, and it's incredible. But it could also be kind of like it was last year, where you'd have some good starts, but then you'd have some where it's like, this guy might not be able to get through 3 or 4 innings. And some of the Hudson starts were that way. And Liberatore starts were certainly that way. The Cardinals don't want to have to deal with that every 5th day, because that, honestly, the strain that put on the bullpen, I think, is a little underrated. We talk about it, but do we really fully understand that, like, your bullpen is better if it's not asked to do so much? And I think they're going to add the bullpen, but they may not do a ton. I don't know if it'll be in clips that we play here, but Mo seemingly kind of satisfied with the back end of the bullpen is what he said, and maybe they'll add some pieces if things come to fruition, but they don't seem to feel as desperate in the bullpen as I kind of thought they'd be. But that could be because some of the young players that emerge, they may slide to that area of your roster rather than having to backfill into the rotation, because they just added 2 guys to do that backfilling for you, and you almost know, barring injury, they're giving you 180, 190 innings, and that's what they're looking for. That's what they didn't have last year. Again, the quality of those innings remains to be seen. I don't think Lance Lynn will have a 5.7 ERA again. Kyle Gibson might be around 4'7", 4'5", but if both those guys are around 4'5", 4'7", and the ballpark helps at Busch Stadium to limit home runs allowed, then maybe things are a little bit better for that reason. But again, that's at the back end. What do the Cardinals do at the front end will still have to be answered.
Along those lines, given sort of the innings with these two guys,
I don't know what this question was, but I'm skipping it because it's too quiet.
I do like the back end.
Here's the bullpen stuff.
Obviously, we had injuries last year, which makes that a challenge. I think we had a couple guys adapting to the pitch clock too, so I think they'll be better situated as we look at 2024. But I wouldn't be surprised if we do a few things in the bullpen between now and spring training. So, certainly if we can add something to that, we think that would be smart.
Seems like the Cardinals feel pretty good about the bullpen. Going to skip ahead. And again, that doesn't mean they're not going to do anything, but I'm just trying to get to the main points before we get out of here.
Other teams believing in that.
Yeah, I think from like the analytical world, I think most teams now have more confidence in understanding what performance looks like there to how.
Going to skip that really as well because it was more a question about like, is there more competition from other teams in terms of what teams are looking at in the like Japan, and now everybody kind of knows. Oh yeah, this Japanese pitcher is good. And Mozeliak saying, yeah, analytics is kind of caught up to that. A little further in his answer, he might have said something more interesting about Yamamoto, so I'm going to play and try to find it.
And or Korea, he doesn't really look at C and those types of tournaments.
No.
And needless to say, there's been some players that have come from Japan that have had, massive success here, and so that gives you confidence that they can play at the highest level.
This is kind of information that we knew.
Part of the. It's certainly something that, we could think about or think through. And, obviously you even just look at somebody like Newbar's success.
Talking more about Japan
popularity.
And, his success and popularity in Japan, does that add something almost off the field to your organization beyond what you could get by Yamamoto pitching for you? Just kind of like we talked about on the podcast, you could be the national team of Japan almost, right? Right? Like you'd have so many fans from Japan that'd be rooting you on. That'd be kind of cool.
In Japan, is there something that, we could be leveraging for that? So our business side is certainly looking at those things.
I'm going to wrap it there because I'm running out of time here before my radio show on KTGR. But that's kind of our thoughts from John Mozeliak. We'll make sure to double back in anything we miss that's major from the press conference. We'll play it for you tonight on the next B Shafe Daily. Hit that subscribe button. Don't miss a minute of our Cardinals coverage this offseason. Appreciate you guys, as always, for watching and listening here on YouTube. Drop your comments below. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll continue to talk in this baseball team all winter long on the Brenden Schaeffer St. Louis Cardinals Writer YouTube channel. That's going to do it. Peace.